Hey, Maria.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Maria, for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time. You're well known for being involved in the longevity space through some of your research as well as a lot of advocacy. It would be great for those who aren't familiar to just get your general background and kind of hear your story from the top to bottom.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really my pleasure. And absolutely. So, hi everyone. My name is Maria Konovalenko. I'm a scientist. I'm doing research in biology of aging. And my story is kind of, I want to say, unorthodox, I guess. Um, so, I'm Russian. I was born. Oh my God, at the edge of the earth, really. I come from a small town, it's called Murmansk. It's beyond the polar circle. It snows about 9 months of winter. It's pretty miserable, but as a kid, I used to love it. All sorts of winter sports, ice skating, skiing, snowball fights, all the good stuff. Um, so I guess as a kid, I always wanted to do something um, big with my life, something interesting, something that would be good for the people. And I kind of was always interested in math and physics. So that's the path I chose. And in my education, then later on went to boarding school. In math and physics to St. Petersburg. Basically, told my parents bye when I was 15, was out at the door, was very happy about that. Uh, and then did my bachelor's and master's in molecular biological physics at the Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology. It's uh, kind of like a Russian analog of MIT, I want to say. So that just people have an understanding. That was about. And during my studies, even though I've always been fascinated by science and different kinds of math, physics, I was lost. I didn't know what to do with my life during my college years, and I was extremely lucky. In the middle of my master's to have met Mikhail Batin, that's the person who started a nonprofit Science for Life Extension Foundation, the one that I worked for 7 years. And Mikhail basically kind of, I guess, opened my eyes to one very neglected problem, which is, we all live, we all age, we get all these terrible diseases. We get heart disease, diabetes, neurodegeneration, arthritis, autoimmune stuff, you name it. But it is absolutely a mystery to the public. Like, nobody really pays a lot of attention or understands that science can actually do something about that. I was completely unaware and was completely hooked basically after one conversation we had. I thought, wow, I can actually do something about so many debilitating human conditions. And I decided to work for the nonprofit. And this is, I guess, how my path in the field of longevity started. That was in 2008. It was a long time ago. Yeah, and since then, like you said, we got to do a lot of cool stuff. We tried to promote aging research. We were raising awareness as fast as we could. We were doing, all sorts of outreach actions in the streets. We organized conferences in genetics of aging and longevity. These were really great. We brought a bunch of professors that worked on different aspects of biology of aging to Russia. It was really, really good times. Yeah, and since and 6 years ago, I was very lucky to um, to be admitted to a PhD program in biology of aging. I've always wanted to do science with my own hands. Um, you know, Advocacy is fun. Um, Working for a nonprofit is really fun, but I really wanted to get the visceral feeling of lab work, of actually doing things with my two hands to help push the research forward.
Yeah, it's a great story, and I appreciate you sharing it from the early days. A question just going all the way back to the beginning about growing up in Russia. I knew you were from Russia. I didn't know exactly how north it sounds like in Russia you grew up. What's it like growing up somewhere where it's 9 months of snow, I think, like you said?
It's actually, I actually miss it. Believe it or not, I live in sunny California. All right, okay. Some aspects of it I don't miss, right? I do like the sun. However, there's this absolutely fabulous, cozy feeling when it's just below freezing and the snowflakes are giant and they're falling and it's dark because we have polar night. um, is during the month of December and beginning of January, there's no sun. For about 3 weeks, it just doesn't rise above the horizon. So there is daylight, but it lasts, I don't know, 6 hours. Basically, you go to school, it's dark, you come back home for lunch, it's light. Then by the time it's time to go to the swimming pool, because I used to swim competitively, um, and and then it's already starting to get dark. And then when after swimming I'm going to the music school, it's pitch black, it's night. So it's basically night, but when it's not super cold, you feel, as a child, I guess, you feel like you're surrounded by this warm cocoon. And I just have the fondest memories of my hometown. I can't wait to be back. I haven't gone back and visited in so many years. I'm really looking forward to, you know, touching base with the north. And the nature is really beautiful. It's barren. If you go maybe 100 kilometers to the north of my hometown, you reach the zone where basically there are no trees because they can't really grow there. It's not enough sun and it's pretty cold, but it toughens you, just kind of living in adverse circumstances makes you meet challenges with just kind of a, oh yeah, I can do it attitude.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I know there's a term that they use in Copenhagen. I went and visited for the first time late last year, and I forget what it's called exactly. It's like hedgy or something like that. It's basically to describe that, something like that feeling that you're describing of just extreme comfort and coziness of being somewhere that's so brutally cold for so much of the year, but then you have people and warm spaces and fire and whatnot to create a feeling that you can't really replicate in California, to your point.
Yeah, there's though quite a lot of adversity in California these days too, with the fires and the changes in the climate that we're witnessing. It's pretty tough actually living here. It's different kind of tough,
Yeah, I
when the
lived
air is
in
not clean.
I lived in San Francisco for 2 years after I graduated. Moved out a couple years ago, thereabouts. And I'm from the East Coast originally, and found that on the one hand, just like the consistency of temperature, which is great in some ways. I missed, maybe somewhat like you. New Jersey is obviously not Russia, but I missed aspects of winter, aspects of a really hot summer. And then now, when I was there, the fires, I remember one morning specifically where we could smell the fires in San Francisco, and it was a bit eerie. But mostly what I noticed was the homelessness issue. Now I can't imagine. It seems like the fires are just kind of everywhere and unavoidable in the midst of this pandemic. It's an odd time. And it seems like as a state, a lot of people, I don't know if you're considering it at all, but a lot of people are kind of moving out at this point.
Yeah, it's like an exodus. I'm not considering moving out at this moment. Well, I just graduated. I have a really cool new job. I'm pretty happy, but it's definitely a concern for a lot of people. And I know I really appreciate the Bay Area because it's such a terrific hub that gathers so many interesting, smart people together. Not to mention, it's one of the best places in the world to be doing research in the biology of aging. You have Stanford, you have Berkeley, you have the Buck, you have UCSF. There's so many labs. It's such a concentration of people who are actually doing research on aging specific, well, research in general, right? But specifically on aging. And just to give you, to give the listeners kind of the perspective, there are actually so few laboratories that are involved in aging research. Here's an example. I got my PhD, I was doing my research at the Buck Institute, and the Buck, I want to say it's the largest hub for aging research in the world, but it only has somewhere around 20 labs. Compare it with any other university or a department, I don't know, of engineering at a university, right? These numbers are really just astonishingly small, yet the Buck is the largest gathering of aging researchers in the world, like physically, you know, in one building. Definitely Stanford has several terrific labs, Berkeley. That's why I really appreciate being here. And it's interesting. I think at the moment, I guess overall interest towards the field of longevity research is growing. Here's an illustration. The Paul Glenn Foundation has been sponsoring these conferences they called BAM, which stands for Bay Area Aging Meeting. And there are two of them in a given year. And they the venue rotates, you know, one time it would be at Stanford, then at the Buck, and Berkeley and UCSF at the Gladstone Institute. And only, I'm going to say 3 years ago, this meeting would have maybe 200 people. The last one was last spring. Oh no, actually, you know what? Come to think about it, it was a year ago at Stanford. It gathered more than 700 people, and it's amazing. It's like triple the numbers. I'm very happy to see more, you know, more training, more people who are just doing general biology research, kind of being drawn into the field. It's fantastic. So I love Bay Area for this kind of reason, that it's such a hub. But having said that, there are obviously amazing work going on in other parts of the country and the world for sure. I'm just kind of expressing gratitude, I guess, to the opportunity for me to be here and to have had the education and the opportunity to do research that I did.
Yeah, it definitely is amazing. And the Buck Institute, from my perspective, as more of an outsider to the space, seems to be kind of the leading institution and research center of a lot of the work that's going on and a lot of the people who are leading the way in longevity and life extension. My introduction, coincidentally, to the field was pretty much exclusively as a result of living in San Francisco. I had read, I think it was on TechCrunch or something, an article about Laura Deming and the work that she was doing, and was able to connect with her and go to some of the early conferences that she held, which happened to be just, within a few miles of where I was working. And there's few places outside of San Francisco, maybe New York, in a number of other fields, or LA, but few places in aging, at least, that you could read an article about the people leading the field, and then the place where they're doing their work turns out to be 10 minutes away or whatever it may be. So certainly, if trying to lead the space and work within it, it seems like the best place to be, fires and non-freezing winters aside. But it's all good. So I want to talk about, you mentioned how the space has really shifted a lot. There's not, a lot of people, as you mentioned, have come in more recently into interest in longevity and in life extension. You are one of the more rare people who has been in it for over a decade now. What do you think has driven some of that evolution and interest in the space?
Yeah, it's actually a terrific question. I have not done much research into this topic, actually, so I'll just share what I think, and it's my impression. I think translatability of basic aging research made one of the big differences. We actually, over the past decade, there has been, I don't want to say a boom, but definitely a large increase in the companies. So people are taking research and bringing it from bench to bedside. There are more companies that basically, they're growing like mushrooms after a rainfall. That's very encouraging. And I think people have finally realized that by targeting the underlying mechanisms of aging, you can actually get at diseases, chronic diseases, like, I don't know, like osteoarthritis, like heart disease, all sorts of things. We have not yet seen a clinical success, but it's only a matter of time. And I think the first drug would be FDA approved, the drug that would target one of the fundamental mechanisms of aging, but of course it would be developed against a certain age-related disease. That approval will kind of really open up the gate, and hopefully the field would be flooded with more people who can do research, more interest from the investor community, more interest from the general public. And hopefully that will eventually translate into more philanthropic support of the basic research, because this is where it all starts. The field of aging itself, it's biology of aging. It's not that old. I want to say maybe the pivotal study was, Cynthia Kenyon's work on the, the worm mutants live twice as long, and that was done in the beginning of the 90s. And since then, we've learned so much, and there's actually quite a few things that can now be taken by entrepreneurs and brought into the clinical setting. And hopefully, we will see more and more examples of this happening, and this will serve as a catalyst for more people being involved and interested.
So you talk about the movement towards practical applications of some of the research that's been ongoing, some of these companies trying to make certain solutions available to consumers, or at least working on it and undergoing clinical studies and things like that. Can you talk about one or two companies that's out there that you're familiar with that's working now that's exciting for you?
Um, yes, absolutely. So, well, okay, I have to start with, I guess, the two more advanced companies. These are Restore Bio and Unity Biotechnology. I'm just going to very briefly say a couple of words, even though both of them were faced with the clinical setbacks. And despite that, I'm very hopeful that in the future, either these companies, the way they are, or people who are developing drugs that are targeting, similar underlying mechanisms of aging would be successful. So one area is mTOR inhibitors. That was the Restore Bio's work. I think it's tremendously important for aging research and holds a lot of promise. And of course, developing senolytics is the second topic. And there's actually a number of other companies in this field as well. An interesting approach is epigenetic reprogramming. And with companies like Turn Bio, for example, I'm very hopeful we will be able to see absolutely new modalities of treatments of diseases and phenotypes of aging coming to the market. Of course, a lot of these companies, they are in the beginning of their path, right? So they're very, very early stage, and it's extremely risky. Developing developing drugs is a just tremendously hard thing to do. I'm very hopeful, though, that we're going to see some successes in the future. It's hard to say who's going to win, first, or who's going to be more successful, or what approach even to combating aging will be more successful. But just judging by the fact that I think we're seeing, if not an exponential growth in the number of new startups, but definitely just huge increases. And it's hard to kind of pick your favorite company. I can't really do that. There are a lot of people doing a bunch of good work.
Yeah, and that was a super helpful overview of a couple of the key strategies. You mentioned senolytics, which for those who are unfamiliar, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically targeting senescent cells, which you can think about as sort of dead zombie cells that are up to no good. And senolytics help eliminate them theoretically to allow people to have healthier bodies and live a bit longer and healthier. On the other side, you mentioned the mTOR inhibitors. The ones I'm familiar with in terms of medicines are Metformin, and I think resveratrol as well is in that category. On the latter category with Metformin and resveratrol, I don't want to get too deep into this for people who aren't super familiar with the space. But as an introduction and just a curiosity, do you know people within, I've read like from David Sinclair, for example, he talks about how people within the space and within his labs are taking metformin. It's not super clear that it's, with a degree of certainty going to lead them to live longer and healthier, but they're in the space and this is their every hour of every day, and they're doing what best they can to achieve that goal. And so a lot of these people are taking things like metformin already. Are you seeing people within the space experimenting with certain drugs that seem likely to be beneficial?
Yes, absolutely. So funny you mentioned metformin. So, well, first of all, a couple of things. You were absolutely right about the senolytics. Yeah, these therapies are targeting senescent cells, the zombie cells that secrete a lot of pro-inflammatory molecules, and that the ones that can transform their neighbors into cancerous cells. So, really bad cells need to be eliminated. mTOR inhibitors, metformin is such, yes. Resveratrol, yes, but at high concentrations. And resveratrol primarily is an activator of sirtuins. So I want to name rapamycin as the most kind of famous mTOR inhibitor. And rapamycin, I guess, is probably the best molecule in aging research that's been shown to extend lifespan and health span in many different organisms that people use for research. Like, it extends a lifespan, in everything. Basically, people tried it, and we don't know what its effects are in people, even though it's an FDA approved drug. People take rapamycin as an immunosuppressant after they had their kidney transplants, and they take rapamycin at really high doses. There is a good chance that rapamycin may do something really, really nice for our bodies. It might improve our cognitive abilities. It might improve, there's a whole list of good things that rapamycin does. On the other hand, unfortunately, there are certain side effects of rapamycin that are quite unpleasant. Therefore, it's kind of a sensitive topic with self-experimentation. I certainly do not advise anybody to, apply any of this stuff to themselves. Like, definitely no advice here. I will say, however, that I myself am taking metformin, and here's why. All right, so metformin has been in the clinic, I don't know, for like 40 years. It's very safe. We know this because there are, probably hundreds of thousands of, maybe millions of people who have been taking it, and there are good data that suggest it's safe, and also that it might be doing something to the way to how we age. So there was this a very inspiring study that basically compared diabetics that were taking metformin or sulfonylurea, that's another anti-diabetic drug, and they were compared with healthy matched adults. And it was shown that mortality of diabetics who were taking metformin was actually lower compared to healthy people. What a result. Obviously, that was, that was not a prospective study. It was an observational. People just kind of gathered a lot of data, basically from the past, right? But it tells you at least something. It's a hint towards maybe there's a beneficial effect of metformin on aging. And mTOR inhibition is only one of the things that metformin does. Actually, people don't know the exact mechanism of action. We do know a couple of things, that it activates AMP kinase and stuff like that. But we have not yet solved the conundrum of what exactly metformin is doing in your body. So I'm taking it just in case, just because it doesn't hurt me at all. I see no changes in my physical performance. I know it's quite an issue for people who do very heavy exercise, because metformin does do a couple, it has a negative impact on basically how well your mitochondria work. But for me personally, I made that choice, together with my doctor. We think why not?
Yeah,
Just why not?
It's interesting you bring up metformin as the one that you've selected to take yourself. That's the one that seems to be most common, and to your point, because I think despite some of the upside that might be available in other drugs like rapamycin, which you mentioned, metformin has been proven safe over time for common use in diabetics. And the study that you mentioned where basically people with diabetes taking metformin were outperforming in terms of their health the people who were totally healthy and not taking metformin. It's certainly intriguing. I wrote about things that I thought, things that I do currently to try to extend my health span and lifespan to the point where hopefully there is some more radical innovation. And I'm pretty optimistic that'll happen. To what degree, I'm not sure, but I wrote about how if I was a bit older, I'd probably be taking metformin in a responsible way. But I do like to exercise a lot, and I don't know. I don't need to. I'm still in my 20s. I don't need to get too involved with too much just yet. But it's super interesting. You mentioned earlier how I actually thought you were going to go in another direction when I asked how the excitement in the space has developed, and you started by saying there's been some translatability. And then you talked about how some of the stuff has come out of the labs and into consumers' hands, or at least is going to be. I thought you might actually be talking about translatability in terms of like international collaboration. I'm curious, being from Russia, has there been any sort of bridge between some of the foundations and some of the research going on in Russia and the US that you've been able to facilitate, or is one, US or Russia significantly behind or ahead of the other, where it doesn't actually matter so much that they're on the same page?
It's an interesting point. I think there's always been international collaboration in science. Scientists are actually terrific at reaching out to other people who they think are doing interesting work and starting new projects. Some of the scientists are very entrepreneurial in this way. So I think that has always been the case. When it comes to Russia, there are, a couple of good labs, and those people have been working with people all around the world. I don't think I can say that I made any difference or impacted this process in any way. I certainly wish there would be more labs in Russia doing biology of aging, but it's very hard to do science over there, unfortunately, due to lack of funding, due to lack of systemic decisions. Some laws are very prohibitive. It's just the number of hurdles that you need to jump over to do biology research. It's quite insane. It's much easier to go to other countries, like to European countries or Asia or the US, and contribute to lab work elsewhere. But again, there are there's a good, healthy amount of very good scientists over there. I'm not saying it's like all bad. I'm saying it's incredibly hard.
That makes sense. We kind of dove headfirst into a lot of this research talking about metformin, senolytics, and alike. I'd like to zoom out a little bit to get your kind of overall view on longevity and life extension and where it is today and how you think about it. You mentioned in a podcast from years ago that I listened to a 4-stage process, I believe that you used to kind of frame out how you saw progress coming into play. And it started with slowing aging a little bit and then slowing aging more, and then ultimately stopping it and then working on rejuvenation or basically reversing aging so that people can, when they're 60, receive some treatment or therapeutics to basically be biologically 40 again, sort of the Aubrey de Grey style of fighting aging. Great guest that I had on the show, actually, as my first episode. Would love to hear where you're thinking about the space now and whether that 4 stages still kind of applies, or if you have a different framework for thinking about all of this.
Yeah, since then I went to grad school, and I think my view has changed. Now, the only thing I can say is that, it's very hard to predict. We don't know what the future holds. I can tell you the following. I think it's safe to say that within the next decade, we will see at least one therapy that is approved by the FDA that targets a mechanism of aging and helps patients with a certain age-related disease. So you can roughly put this in the category of slowing aging in at least one of the biological systems by, somewhat. But we actually don't know by how much. It depends on the intervention. It depends on the therapy. I am absolutely, no, I don't want to say that it's all going to go very slow at first. What if we come up with really rejuvenative therapies that can act upon several organs at the same time? That may actually reverse aging and sort of turn the clock backwards, if you will. And that can happen much faster just because, technological progress is going forward, really fast in many different areas with the techniques like single cell sequencing, a lot of the knowledge that we're getting. Let me rephrase that. We are getting a lot more knowledge per unit time than we used to, and that pace is going to only accelerate. So it's very hard and probably unprofessional of me to make any kind of predictions. I do think that the first steps they will be incremental. It's just I'm not sure about the second steps, or second group of steps. They may well be quite transformative. And I'm actually I want to say I'm more optimistic now than I used to be several years ago.
So you mentioned that you're really excited about what you're doing now. Would love to hear about your current focus in the space and what you spend a lot of your time doing today.
Absolutely. So my graduate work was about roughly 3 topics. It was stem cell aging, mTOR biology, and cellular senescence. And right now, I'm kind of finishing up my experiments. I wish I could share the details, but I would like to get things published first. The focus of my lab work is I'm very much interested in the overlap of different mechanisms of aging. I think that combinations of different things will be eventually where we will end up. I mean, even right now, people are taking, polypharmacy. People would have a pill against one thing, a pill against, another disease. And at the same time, a person is, at least an older person is taking several drugs, right, simultaneously. And I think we will be we will be searching for potential synergistic and additive effects of different therapies aimed at different mechanisms of aging, but then at the same time, the ones that could produce like an even greater result. I would really love that to be the case. And there's actually quite a bit of evidence that may happen. And my work was an example, like a search for a synergy or an additive effect between mTOR inhibition and deleting senescent cells. Here are the other examples of combinations in aging. So there was this first really, really inspiring piece of work done by Pankaj Kapahi's lab. He's a professor at the Buck. They took a worm and created 2 deletions in this worm, 2 mutations. So if you do these mutations separately, one would give you 60% life extension. The other one would give you 100% life extension. If you do them together, you won't get 160. Guess what? How much you're going to get? It's around 450%. So that's a synergistic effect of 2 things done at the same time. How cool is that? So this just suggests that there's some untapped potential in our biology to give us just way more that we can do by targeting one thing at a time. There are other examples. For example, drugs could be actually synergistic. Rapamycin and metformin fed to mice actually produce a life extension effect that is greater than the sum of each one done separately. There are other examples of combinations of, there's interesting work done by Jan Gruber. He's at the National University of Singapore. He tried a combination of 3 drugs, had synergistic effects for longevity in worms, and was able to actually pick those combinations based on kind of intelligent design, based on their genes that they would turn on and off in a worm. So I think just at some point of time, we'll figure out how to create a therapy that would be truly synergistic. And we will be able to translate it in humans. It's just that there's a bunch more research that needs to be done right now. I'm quite passionate about this whole combinations thing. That's why I chose a project on a combination for my graduate work. One lesson that I learned is that biology is incredibly hard, and everything that may go wrong will indeed go wrong, if you know what I mean. Yes. So hopefully I will publish my results sometime soon. And then I will be able to talk about them in more detail.
That's great. The synergistic possibilities of all these things sounds super, hopeful for the ability of drugs like metformin and rapamycin, but also anything to be developed in the future, and working across these different things to achieve an outcome that, like you said, I think could be hard to imagine. I'm excited to see your work when it's published, and continue to follow all of this, obviously. Last thing I want to talk about is obviously people who are hopeful about this meaningful life extension that could be coming to humans in the future. They want to do the best that they can to get to the point where that might happen, and give themselves, by means that are already known to work, the best chance at living a long and healthy life. So I kind of think of that in terms of exercise, nutrition. For me, fasting is sort of related to that, and then sleep, as well as the different supplements that people can take. What are some of the things? I know when we jumped on, you were just getting finished with a workout yourself. What are some of the things you do in terms of exercise, nutrition, or otherwise that you believe in, that, not to say that they're going to work necessarily for you or for anyone else, but just curious to hear kind of from someone so deep in the space, what sort of practices you practice?
Definitely, yes. I am a huge believer in exercise. Really, all these things that you mentioned, there are good data that suggests that exercise and diet are, at this moment of time, probably the best tools we have. I'm saying this because we don't know how to safely and efficaciously dose things like rapamycin in a human. And if you listen to, for example, Peter Attia, one of my favorite humans, who actually talks quite a lot about this issue. I mean, before we figure out these regimen that may actually work in people safely, we have to do, whatever we can right now. And the easiest thing, okay, maybe not the easiest thing, but exercising, increasing the number, the number of days a week you exercise, improving the quality of your workouts, the length, that all is going to just be beneficial for you. Exercise needs to be also dosed in a safe and sane way. People shouldn't be overloading their bodies with, insane amount of CrossFit exercising or whatever. I think I increased my average number to 5. I'm still not at every day a week because, there's life. But I'm certainly striving to be more physically active. Sleep is insanely important. One of the overlooked problems is that, we just don't get enough sleep, or the quality of our sleep is subpar. So yeah, getting eight hours a day, I think that's crucial. Diet is a complex topic. Certainly the evidence accumulated by the scientific community to date suggests that a diet that would be lower in protein, higher in the good fat, and certain, you can't eliminate completely one of the three, groups of macronutrients, right? You can't completely exclude, nor should you, let's say, like, carbs out of your diet. That's not great. I think that every diet should be tested in a clinical setting, and it's a huge problem at the moment. People are saying, ketogenic diet is great. Well, maybe not for you, maybe for one person it will be, but there's no guarantee it's going to, a solution is going to work for everybody the same way. And it's some diets are maybe even harmful, like a paleo diet, for example. Certainly very high protein, a lot of mTOR activation, quite unlikely to be beneficial in the long term. Probably good for losing weight in the short term, but from the standpoint of longevity, I don't think so. One of the few things that was actually tested clinically is the fasting mimicking diet that Walter Longo, who is the professor at USC, Walter's doing great research in, genetics of aging and dietary interventions. So what he found based on his work is that if you create a diet that would have around 10% protein and like 35% carbs and the rest would be good fat, everything plant-based, that reduces certain markers of inflammation in people. And I'm looking forward to further publications of the clinical work that Walter is doing. But in general, I'm a fan of his work. And there are not many examples like that. So people should be really careful when choosing, a diet. It's very hard to make a recommendation in this space.
Yeah, I totally appreciate the what you're saying about how it's personal for everyone. I actually just yesterday got shipped in the mail a product I'm pretty excited about from a company called Levels that helps. It basically does continuous glucose monitoring and helps people have insights into their metabolic health and fitness. And so that's, obviously personal to me to a much larger extent than just reading from someone who believes really strongly in the ketogenic diet and thinks that it's worked well for them. I'm pretty curious to see. It's only been a day, so I can't really speak to it yet, but I'm curious to see what insights and changes in my life might come out of that. But Maria, I want to wrap up here and give you the last word. It's been awesome talking with you today. I learned a ton, and I think a lot of people will. And I'm super excited about the work that you're doing and people in the space working on longevity as a whole. It's hard to find something that's more hopeful than the idea that people could live longer and healthier lives. And so anyone who's working to further that mission, I think is great. And I'm doing my part, hopefully, to bring some attention to it. And with that, hopefully some more financing. And then with that, hopefully some more progress.
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's been absolute pleasure. I highly value your work. I think spreading the word is what the field needs. I would like to encourage people to dig deeper into any kind of information they find about, a potential something that might make them live longer and healthier. Learn more about that. Dig deeper. Seek out more articles. Seek, if you can't read hard science, that's quite all right. There's quite a lot of information on the web about all sorts of things. Don't make rash decisions. Use common sense and have faith that longevity is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you're interested in this field, figure out what you can do. The field really needs your help. If you can spread the word, that's amazing. Being active on social media can definitely raise the tide of general public awareness. If you can do more things, that's even better. So my message is to encourage people to get more educated on this topic. But yeah, thank you so much. For those who are interested, you guys can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Konovalenko, trying to do my little input in raising awareness, my little thing. Thank you so much. It's been really fun.